More than 5 decades ago, Dr. Curtis Harper started walking through the doors of Mary Ellen Jones to leave his mark on the pharmacology community at UNC Chapel Hill as the first African American faculty member to receive tenure. It is our greatest honor today to present some of the many legacies of Dr. Harper as remembered fondly by his family, friends, and colleagues.
He was always interested in reading about science more than how things actually work, He didn't actually take things apart and put them back together. I found his interest more in reading about things,
Education was very, very important in our family and emphasized in elementary education, do your best. They always wanted us to do our best and make good grades.
Curtis went to Tuskegee. I followed him to Tuskegee, and so did Pat.
Well, it would have been 1961, 62. My father started his lab at Iowa State University, and Curtis was one of his first students. There was one other graduate student named Jerry Wong at the time, and then one undergraduate, Bob Seelock, that came in a little bit later.
So my story with Curtis started in October of 1962. Graves hired me, and I was charged with keeping the laboratory provided with glycogen phosphorylase purified from rabbit muscle. In my first solo prep, I've got the homogenated rabbit muscle, 3 liters of it in a beaker, and I'm distributing it into centrifuge tubes, just started it, and the beaker broke because I wasn't supporting it from underneath. The floor was made of 3 by 3 inch bricks held together by hard cement. And the result was, over the years, the decades even, the bricks had been worn down and the cement stayed up. So I had not a puddle, but I had about 25 discrete pools of homogen in them. And I'm thinking, this is it. Just as I'm thinking about this, Curtis comes in. And Curtis surveys the situation and he says, well, Bob, there's nothing to do now but pick it up off the floor and test for enzyme activity. And I thought, who is this guy? Because I didn't really know Curtis. I said, who is this guy? What's going to happen here? But he's got this way about him. And eventually Curtis left and got a mop. And he gave me the mop. And I mopped it up, and by this time I was beginning to feel that maybe my biochemistry career wasn't dead after all. And that event illustrated, he knew that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, and I was expecting all sorts. And of course, he fit right in with the atmosphere in the Graves lab at that time, because that's the way Don Graves really was too. Graves would not have thrown me out of the lab for that mistake. The next day, of course, I did my solo prep and made it work. Retrospectively, I wish I had followed his suggestion, picked the stuff up out of the little pools, spun down the homogenate, and of course all the dirt that was on the floor would have come down too, and I would have made an excellent preparation of glycogen phosphorylase, and Curtis would have been particularly proud. Curtis left the lab after his master's degree, and our paths pretty much diverged.
So he finished his master's degree with my father on the study of glycogen phosphorylase and did some very nice work studying how this enzyme works. I didn't realize, though, that he was on faculty here till I came to interview here, and was pleasantly surprised to see him sitting in the audience. And so immediately we hit it off, and I was so pleased to have the opportunity to come here and work and to actually have Curtis as a colleague. He was very active with the toxicology program, which at the time, and if it's not still, was one of the absolute top programs in the nation. And so he spent a lot of time working with toxicology faculty and students in teaching toxicology as well as pharmacology. But I would say it was, again, it had more of an organic chemistry basis, which was his strength, and that he applied it to enzymology and then later pharmacology and toxicology. But it was sort of chemistry at the root of it all. So I remember looking at some of his papers and not really knowing the area very well, but realizing that he had made a nice contribution to that area of research as well.
Believe it or not, I came to UNC intending to do something called behavioral pharmacology. They had a couple of people there who were pretty well known in the field, and that's why I ended up at North Carolina. And I didn't know anything about toxicology, which is what Curtis was doing. And so I chose his lab for one of my rotations, discovered that it really was interesting and it really excited me. And I thought, wow, the stuff Curtis was working on just seemed more interesting. So that's sort of how I ended up in his lab, and we kind of hit it off in that regard. And, as they say, the rest is history.